Hi everyone, and welcome to the Overeaters Anonymous 100 Pounders special focus meeting. Today is Wednesday, the 12th of July, 2023, and we are delighted to have our speaker, Mark D, with us today. Mark came into our way in June 2017. He grew up in Dublin city centre, but now lives in Naas, County Kildare. Mark, we look forward to hearing your experience, strength and hope. I hand over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Lee. And to the likes of Susie, who's our first ever meeting, welcome home. This really is the place to be. And this is where I found, a real path to a lasting, true recovery that gave me this emotional sobriety, this emotional recovery, because at the end of the day, this is an emotional illness that just kind of manifests itself through food. And kind of, what happened for me was, and I'll explain all of this, was that, I kind of, more or less from as soon as I was born, my relationship with food was, extremely disordered right from the get-go. And so I do believe that I was born with this, but look, if not, it was when I was extremely young. And, again, that's sort of, maybe just to give sort of some of the numbers. My heaviest is, in and around 20 stone. I don't know, that's 280 pounds. I don't know kind of if that was the heaviest I ever was. I know that if I possibly was heavier. I know at my lightest, and again, I'll talk about some of the crazy behavior that I kind of indulged in. I kind of went down to, a very, very low weight of about 130 to 140 pounds. And now I remain a very constant kind of 155 to 160 pounds. And, I really want to just try and get across what I've done to remain where I'm at and to remain in recovery, but just a little bit of, a bit about me. So, as Lee said, I grew up in Dublin. I grew up in inner city Dublin in an area just right beside Sheriff Street, which was known by the local police as Beirut. It was mad. It was absolutely mad. It was crazy. But I grew up in a very, very loving home with very, very loving parents. I was the youngest of four boys. And, as I was growing up, there was a lot of, a massive heroin epidemic hit kind of, Dublin, and especially inner city Dublin. And of the people I went to primary school with, that's kind of up to the age of about 11, 12 years of age. There was 18 in that class and 16 are dead, primarily because of addiction and mostly because of drug overdoses. And also just to say, I'm also a recovering alcoholic as well. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that because that's actually quite important in my food story. But again, this is about food. But, when I was about 6, I had an accident that was kind of very, very life-changing. I slid down the banisters, and honestly, it was the very first time that I slid down the banisters. And I was about 6 years old, and I kind of fell from the banisters onto this rock hard floor, and I fractured my skull. On the way to the hospital, where I was absolutely just rushed to hospital, I was actually pronounced dead, and my parents were actually told that I was dead. But, and again, I don't know what happened to me that they were able to, bring me back to life. I just remember this doctor standing over me, this big, bright, shiny light. And he just said, "You're going to be okay." And I don't know, then I just drifted back off into more or less unconsciousness. But, again, then when I was kind of around 7, my mother got very, very sick, and my mother had this, she had to have one of her lungs removed. And because I was the youngest of 4 boys, I was the last to know. I was told this the day before my mother went into the hospital. And like I was devastated. But it then but my food was already out of control at this stage. I was already eating as much as my parents would more or less allow me to eat. And then, my dad has an incredible sweet tooth, and he'd kind of slip me extra chocolate and all that sort of stuff. But when it came to me making my communion, which is this kind of religious thing, at about the age of, between around 7 years old, if I remember correctly, um, I was brought to get my suit for making my communion, and my mother had me in the kids' area looking for a suit. Lo and behold, not one of them fit me. She got somebody to measure me, and I had this 32-inch waist. My mother was absolutely horrified, and the shame of being brought over to the adult section, the horror on my mother's face. My mother then started having all these phone calls and people calling to the house, and again, all these whispers and whatever else. And I just remember, and to this day, that still brings up, kind of memories of shame and whatever else. And shame is a really, really horrible place to be. But that didn't stop me eating. If anything, it possibly made me worse. And again, when it came to food, I would do anything to, feed my addiction to food. And, again, I stole from my brothers. I have three brothers that are older, kind of two of them would have been working at that stage. And again, I'm not very proud of that, whatsoever. But because of my mother's illness, and because my mother, it was a very, very long recovery and whatever else, I was hiding in plain sight, and my weight, gain just was going, well, kind of not unnoticed, but kind of, it was like, there's bigger kind of issues going on here. So I was kind of hiding in plain sight. And the other way that I was able to, put on all this weight as well was because I was the youngest, I was the first home from school. Somebody had to make the dinners, and that was me. And, additional stuff was put into the pot. It didn't make it to anybody else bar me. So I was just, any food I could get my hands on. Money wasn't in very plentiful supply whatsoever. So this was the cheapest of the cheapest of, food and whatever else. And, and again, so it was just quantity. It was just, all of that kind of horrible stuff. But, then kind of, a little while later, kind of when I was about, 11 or 12 years old, I kind of, really got into music and whatever else. And it was, I started, I kind of found alcohol because I was involved in this kind of, brass band. And, I was the youngest in the group. Most people were of drinking age and whatever else. But I was kind of, kind of 5'9", 5'10", and people just assumed I was in and around the same age as them. And because the alcohol did the same thing as the food, and it turned down that noise in my head, I kind of thought, wow, this is fantastic. So there I was, drinking, eating, and I thought this was absolutely fantastic. But again, so I drank as frequently as I could, all the way through school, but, when I got to kind of 17, 18 years old, when I was about to go to college, I kind of said, hey, look, if I want to have relationships with a woman, I'm going to have to, my image management really kind of kicked in, and I kind of said, oh, I want to lose weight. So I started getting involved in, kind of getting out there and getting active. And the weight was falling off me, and my parents were delighted. But then the weight stopped coming off me. And then I realized if I stopped eating, the weight then would start coming off again. which it did. And again, my parents were absolutely delighted by this. So they weren't quite egging me on, but it was giving me permission to do this. But again, a little while later, then, I was walking. I started going out with this girl. She's now my wife, but she's not my wife. She wasn't my girlfriend. I took a hostage, and she was a hostage to my food, to my very disordered relationship with food of, not eating for very long periods of time, then binge eating, then alcohol having the same kind of chronic effect. And it then was even getting into the bartering system of, look, Mark, will you please eat, and you can have these beers. This was just mad. And that's the way our relationship very sadly went. And my wife didn't really know how bad the drinking was and all of that. She kind of had some idea the food wasn't quite where it should be. But again, that's just the way it went. And, a little while later, then, my alcoholism was absolutely out of control. My food was absolutely out of control. I was still somehow managing to hold down a job. And, my wife had given me every ultimatum under the sun. And again, there was just no way that, I was listening. And I'd gone down to, I was skin and bones, I looked very unhealthy. I'd had liver function tests done. They weren't looking so good either. And, so I was really, really on my way out. My wife still shows me an email that she sent to an undertaker to find out how much it was going to cost to bury me, because she knew this was coming. She knew this was on the way. But there was one morning, I don't remember this. I saw that I had a missed call from my mother, and I went to ring her back the next day. And I rang her back, and I was drunk, and it was very early in the morning. And so she rang my sister-in-law, who lives right next door to us, and said, look, I think Marcus had a seizure. Another thing I developed thanks to my eating disorder and the bang on the head that I got, and probably the alcoholism as well. But certainly eating disorders can cause people to have seizures. But so my mother thought that I'd actually had a seizure, and that I was sort of still very groggy or whatever else. So my sister-in-law came into me with her, maybe 4-week-old baby in her arms, and I abused her, and I told her to go, and her ideas of how I am, blah blah blah, she could go and take a running jump, basically. I don't remember any of this, but she rang my mother, told me I was okay, rang my wife and said, Mark's as drunk as a lord. It's early in the day. Something really needs this. There's something really badly wrong here. So I was whisked off into a treatment center. And when I arrived at that treatment center, I absolutely was in full admission that, yeah, I drank excessively and to extreme amounts. But I didn't tell them about the food. I didn't mention the food in any way, shape, or form, because they could have the alcohol. I was keeping the food because the food was my security blanket. That was the security blanket. That was my go-to from the very early ages of my very existence as a person. And it was the other people I was in the treatment center with. They're the ones who actually realized there's something very odd with his eating, and they reported me. And this all then had to be looked at. And I remember I was then basically, I wasn't asked, I was told to start going to eating disorder meetings. So my first OA meeting that I went to, I was told to go to it. But as it happens, I was sitting in that meeting, and I was, pontificating out of me all about, no, nothing really wrong with my food, blah, blah, blah. My sponsor was at that meeting. And my sponsor There was something just that really attracted me to what they were saying, and one or two others, but but I still kind of went, no, this eating disorder thing. But I looked at my food, and yeah, look, by the time I left that treatment center, I had some sort of, admission, probably very little acceptance around having an eating disorder. But hey, look, I was involved in OA. Then I started going to more and more OA meetings, and I heard the message. I heard people doing a chair like what I'm doing now. And I actually started identifying with people and going, oh, actually, yeah, maybe. And I heard somebody tell, but not quite the same story, but very, very similar. And that obsession, that that allergy of the body, the twist of the mind, step one, Dr. Silk. This was, you know what I mean? I had this, and I really, really had to, get that, the admission and the acceptance that I had an eating disorder. And, as I said at the start, this is an emotional illness. And what I've come to learn and has been said to me, told to me, learned, and again, this is all through working with a sponsor and, going to meetings and, introspectively looking at myself, is every time there's something wrong with me, absolutely without fail, it's that my emotions and feelings are kicking off. That's the thing then that sets the madness in my head kind of going again. And it's just when I think of that, and again, because I wasn't really able to do sports in school and stuff, I was quite a high achiever in school, and all of that. And I was earning a lot of money, and I kind of thought I had this made. I was the big shot, blah blah blah, and I was gonna absolutely analyze this to within an inch of its life and work out where this all came from and whatever. But to accept that I have an eating disorder, I don't know where that came from, and to be honest, I don't actually care where it actually came from. But there's a particular part in the big book, and it's on page 45, where it's like, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and that power had to be greater than ourselves. But obviously, how are we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main objective is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. And I loved the way at the start of the meeting, the way that it was like, yeah, look, if there's a newcomer, if there's somebody who's new in the room, we'll send you out the literature, we'll send you out that big book. This is the book that has the message that saved not only my life, but the life of the people around me, the emotional wellness that they have as a result of me being in recovery. I know a lot of people in recovery, and their lives have changed absolutely immeasurably as a result of them being in recovery. Hey, look, my emotional sobriety, not every day is it absolutely wonderful and fantastic. And as I keep on saying to people, ask my wife how I am today. Don't ask me, because she'll be able to tell you, whether I'm good, bad, or indifferent. And, it wasn't only the binge eating that I did. I was also a binge thinker. And again, it's that trying to think my way out of a problem. And that's why 10-step calls are so, so important. Them outreach calls, that's, pop your number in the chat, because when our thinking goes off, we need to talk to somebody who has the same illness as us, and they're able to then kind of, talk you down off the ledge, kind of, so to speak. But a man I know, he says this every time, and this is why he has loads of phone numbers, is not everybody is sane on the same day. So if you ring somebody and they're mad the same day you're mad, hang up and ring the next person, because there's probably a good chance that they're in not too bad of a place that day, and they'll, be able to help you. And, getting that power greater than you. I came into this an absolute placard carrying atheist or agnostic. I was so stupid, I didn't realize what an atheist or an agnostic was, but I was, saying all of this stuff out loud. When I think back, it's kind of quite funny. But again, one of the counselors said to me, look, Mark, if you don't get yourself a higher power, you're absolutely, you can put in whichever expletive fits whatever's going on in your mind. And so I used my dad as my higher power at the start, because my dad was a very, very, very spiritual man, incredibly well read on spiritual matters. And he's a man who never lied to me, never, ever, ever lied to me. And I went, wow, that will do. And I remember I was about maybe 4 or 5 months in recovery. I was walking down Grafton Street in Dublin, and I was going to turn right to go to an early morning AA meeting. And the church bell went. And the church bell went. And for some reason, I decided to go to the church service. And I just, whatever happened, that my higher power changed over to God. But again, that's only for me. Once you have a power greater than you in your life, that will really, really, really help. And it's funny, because what really started getting my mind rolling on this was I heard a man doing a chair, and he was very open about how he had this wonderful relationship with his higher power. This was an AA meeting. I found out later on that man doing that chair is actually a member of this wonderful, great fellowship as well. And again, the wonderful comfort when I saw him in a room, and I'm there going like, wow, this is just, beyond belief. That changed so much for me. And, when it says in the big book about that, that, I was inwardly reorganized and on a different footing. And, when I think of the spiritual growth that I've gotten, the emotional security, the emotional sobriety that I've gotten as a result of this, program, it's absolutely, unbelievable. And, this for me, I know it was read out at the start about, what are the, core parts of the program. And, I'll just talk you through what, for me, are the core things that I did for me to get well. And they are so aligned with what was read out earlier in the meeting. I was kind of smiling when they were being read out. And, first off, I had to get into the program. The program is your meetings. We're on a meeting. We're oh, sorry, not the program. Sorry, the fellowship. So we're at a fellowship meeting here, and the fellowship is absolutely wonderful. But if you want to improve your recovery, if you want to kind of start going to that place where you start getting this emotional sobriety, you need to do the program. And the program of them 12 steps that were so wonderfully read out earlier as well. And the way to do that is to get yourself a sponsor. And your sponsor needs to be in recovery. Your sponsor needs to have the same illness that you have. And, your sponsor should ideally have a sponsor as well. And, by doing that, that absolutely, absolutely was a game changer, an absolute huge game changer for me. And, like, again, a thing I had to do before embarking on that journey, and a thing that thankfully the treatment center helped me a lot with, and my sponsor helped me a lot with, was there's this concept and idea of red and green foods. And the red foods are, if I eat that, I'm going to binge. That will set me off. And to know what your red foods are, your green foods, what can I eat? What can I eat safely? And again, that I can eat safely. have a meal plan around that. And, to kind of, for me, to eat at the, same time each day is how I do that. I know there's also this talk of, you hear people talking about, maybe amber foods, which are, I can eat in moderation, but I really have to be very mindful. I personally, because of the black and white thinking of being an addict, I can't go into that amber gambler sort of thing of, oh, I might just try my hand at something there that I know could set me off. And that's what brings me the neutrality around food. And I look at my red and green food lists on at the start pretty early. At the start of recovery, I looked at that very regularly. But now I look at it every maybe kind of 3 months, 4, 6 months, whatever it might be, because sometimes you might say, God, am I eating a bit too much of that? And to maybe see, well, maybe that needs to go onto the red list. And, again, another tip that I got in the treatment center was, if you're going out shopping, bring a shopping list with you, and only stuff that's on that shopping list ends up in your basket. I remember being in a particular supermarket, and they were doing a buy one, get one free on a particular product. I had one of them in my basket. The lovely lady who was serving me, she started saying, oh, there, buy one, get one free. Go back and get yourself a second one. And I said, no, not interested. Don't want the second one. She said, look, I'll run back and get it for you. And I ended up screaming at her and going absolutely mad. And so, like, that's where I fell off that beam, that recovery beam. Thankfully, I didn't make it out of the supermarket before my conscience kicked in and said, Mark, you're a lunatic. What's going on for you? And I went back and I promptly apologized to that lady. And I said, hey, look, I'm really, really sorry. I was absolutely, completely and utterly out of order. And you were just trying to do your job and be very, very kind. And so again, that kind of step one, the admission, the acceptance, that is absolutely fundamental and key. The other fundamental key part is that step 3, handing our will and our lives over to a God of our own understanding. Again, every single day, I do that. I don't get it right every single day, because quite frequently I'm back in control, driving the bus, and, I give God the day off. So, I don't always get that right, but more days than not, I do get that right, at least kind of for quite a portion of the day, I get that right. Again, that's step 4 and 5, hold nothing back. When I talked to my sponsor and asked them to be my sponsor, they said, Mark, I will help you. I will move heaven and earth to try and help you get recovery, as long as you're brutally honest. And you can tell me absolutely anything, but as long as you're brutally honest. And when I was doing step 4, there was 2 things that I was taking to the grave with me. And them words from my sponsor, when I was writing that out on a Saturday morning, kept on ringing in my head. And I said, I can't not put them in there. And I wrote them down, and tears streaming down my face. And the relief I got, even just by writing it out. But I remember giving it away to my sponsor, and my sponsor, for some of it, again, I don't go into graphic detail, my sponsor was holding my hand when I was giving that away. And that was part of setting me free and rocketing me into that 4th dimension that's talked about in the big book. And again, this was fundamental to my recovery. I now have a peace and a serenity that I never had before. I never had it as a child. I never had it right way up until I was about 41 years of age. But I am so lucky that I've found this now, that I've found this just over 6 years ago. And it's, again, like some of the things that have, that have happened to me throughout the years in recovery. When I left that treatment center, my one-on-one counselor sat down with me and my wife and said, if Mark loses his job, he's going to struggle. And if you, my wife, if you get sick, Mark's going to be in trouble. And I think 4 months, nearly to the day, my wife had a diagnosis of lung cancer, and I didn't eat. And that was only because of having a sponsor. That was only because of going to meetings. That was only because of putting in the footwork. That was only because of crying in loads of meetings. People putting their arm around me, people helping me, people ringing me, people just saying, are you okay? And, the things that helped me stay in recovery is to have a sponsor, to have sponsees, because if I don't carry this message, absolutely, my sponsor spent a lot of time with me, and my sponsor absolutely has given me a gift. And my sponsor had that as a stipulation when we started, that my sponsor said to me, you need to carry this message because that's why I'm carrying this to you. And I need to have sponsees. I learn more from my sponsees than I sometimes learn from my sponsor, because my sponsees are showing me, maybe do I need to look at that? Maybe do I need to, because I've never even thought of that angle. Because when I came in, I absolutely, no, I know exactly what's going on, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't teachable. I need to remain teachable. Every day, I need to remain teachable. I needed to journal every day, write out, on a good day, maybe a paragraph or two just about what was going on for you. On the bad days, that ran into maybe several pages, but it helps you, as Harlan says, that uncover, discover, discard. And it helps you see what's going on for you, what's beneath the hood, what's beneath the bonnet of the car, what's making you tick. Doing a 10th step. My God, doing that 10th step is absolutely so vital. And to be able to give that away to somebody else.
Sorry, Mark, that's time. I don't think you could hear Harry.
Sorry, it was that 20 minutes or?
No, that's all of it. Apparently you couldn't hear Harry when he announced.
Oh, sorry.
If you just want to wrap up, that's fine.
Yeah. So basically, do your 10 steps each day, give it away to somebody else, pray, meditate, and learn how to respond and not react. And then for me, the most important one is to have a bit of fun on the way while doing it, because by God, there was no fun when I was in addiction. So thanks everybody for listening. And, it was a pleasure and an honor to do this today.
Thank you so much, Mark.